have several layers of information of how it came into being and the processes used. And so in the finished metal casting, there's some wood grain that comes through. There's fingerprints that were in the wax. I want a kind of layering of time in the finished work so that the work seems potentially futuristic and archaic simultaneously. So I'm interested in opposites or potential opposites happening at the same time. And it's important to me that I make all or a large part of the work myself. I did not weave the cotton strap, but ultimately I don't want the work to be about me. I want it to be at a distance from me. Practice, I thought, and this is a reminder to myself as well, practice is really a reminder that trying to create sculpture and think about it, I don't pretend to have anything figured out. And so even when I'm creating, even when I think of sculpture as finished, really it's not finished. It's one point in a long process of creativity. This sculpture I put in here, my work changed maybe 6 years ago, and this is an early one from that time period. Very interested in the relationship between this is a fabricated wood and the shadow it casts. So that's a whole other talk. This sculpture looks different from what I'm doing now. What I'm doing now is directly related to this. So the idea of creating an overall system, it's based on imagery and a set of ideas, but an overall system. And then part of that system I took into a malleable cast rubber, and another part I took into a rigid material. This is wood. And so the fairly simple idea of a preservation and a distortion that occur simultaneously and reinforce one another. That's an idea that I think about pretty much every day now in the studio. I think one of the main reasons I continue to make sculpture is that I learn from it, and I learn things that I don't know how else to learn them, and they seem important to me. So, well, what are those things? Well, I don't know that I can tell you. But what I can point to. So in the process of making this, this is you can kind of see it. It's a shape that's maybe replicated, and there's some splitting going on and folding, and then ultimately there are kind of two halves that are opened up, and then where they join, there's a little curved space. We'll see it in the next image that opened up. That was unexpected to me. So this little space. So what is that? Well, for me, what it is, I mean, this was intended to be empty, right? So I knew that. And then, like out here and even in here, that's a different kind of emptiness. In my mind, this is a third kind of emptiness that was created from joining two empty spaces. So what is that? Well, I don't know. But that's the reason I go to the studio every day, to have moments like that. And they're really, they're not controlled. Me showing up and wanting to have that kind of experience doesn't mean that I get it. It's more accidental. Maybe sounds too random. I don't know that it's accidental. Serendipitous. Yeah. But that's the reason I'm a sculptor. That kind of thing. And then what does that point to in terms of dealing with what we might consider like consensus or everyday reality? What does that tell me about the rest of the world? This is maybe a good example of an idea I started the talk with. So thinking about the surface and the support, really the surface as a space of experimentation. So cultural reference to not just the art gallery, but perhaps a scientific lab. Why I started thinking about alchemistry is the idea of scientific precursor that maybe wasn't as rational in the way that we think of science now. Maybe involved a greater intuitive component. And so these are kind of unknown. That's ultimately what I want to do, is make something that's unknown, which is really, really hard to do. One of the tensions in my own thinking is that I don't see my work as abstract in terms of the history of art, meaning I don't see it as referential. My goal is to make a non-referential sculpture, knowing that if I were able to do that, it wouldn't be visible. Right? So then, like, where does that leave one? You know? Just kind of end up going to Home Depot and buying some more wood.
Very philosophical. You see the philosopher in you, yeah.
So this is just some more recent work within the last couple of years, maybe 2 years ago. This image, you can't see it, but there's the shape is hollow, and then it has kind of a silk pocket. And it's a good example of, you know, what is it? I don't really know, but I know how it feels to me, and that's what I went by. So in the notes that I put together and read, part of what I'm trying to get at is in the history of sculpture, and I would say in contemporary sculpture, is the idea that ultimately one interacts with a sculpture or a good sculpture as one interacts with another person. And so it's a one-to-one relationship where the communication maybe isn't quite the word I want, but the communication between the sculpture and the person is a dialogue, and the sculpture is a kind of externalized mind, so it becomes a kind of living thing, maybe a different kind of living thing than a person, but a kind of living thing nonetheless. It's its own mind. So that's what I'm trying to engage. And so when I say it's how it makes me feel, it's how I receive the feeling it emits, would be another way to say it. And that's the goal, isn't to say I'm successful in it. A lot of times I'll kind of go back to forms and patterns I've used previously, and this is an example. We saw that earlier sculpture. This is a more later version of it. And I might go back to it again. There's still something there for me. So often I don't know. I try not to make. I try to make each sculpture an individual and not an extension of another sculpture. But a lot of times there's something unfinished or unsettled, and so I'll go back and create another version of it. So it's maybe like a sibling. Then you can see that kind of thinking is obviously apparent in, you know, anytime we see a larger form, smaller form, it becomes mother-child. I think I'm going to show you two more sculptures, and that'll be it.